Chapter 18. Cindy was leaving Farrington Kingdom behind, along with her beloved vampire king. She was stuck in the carriage with Laundus, while her stepmother and stepsisters were riding in front. Her husband-to-be was snoring loudly next to her, and she was considering jumping out of the carriage. Ida had put a spell on her, knowing she would try to tell Caspian the truth. Cindy could have gone to the king sooner. Then perhaps now she would be free. It appeared as though her stepmother didn't want to waste any time. She announced that Cindy, Susan, and Teresa were to accompany Laundus back to his cottage. Then she proceeded to tell Cindy the wedding plans were well on their way, too. Apparently, Laundus liked the idea of a quick marriage, and he wanted Cindy to begin working on his farm as soon as possible. They had already been on the road for a few hours, and Cindy was considering all her options. Ida must have sensed that Cindy could change her mind at any moment, so she wanted to rush things along. She'd told Cindy to pack as soon as they'd returned home from the ball. She attempted to sleep for another 2 hours, but Laundus was snoring so loudly that she eventually gave up. At some point, the carriage finally stopped, and when Cindy peered out the window, she saw an obscure cottage that stood on the edge of a field. Laundus truly lived in the middle of nowhere. Cindy just needed a horse. Laundus most likely had a few. She could find her way back to Farrington. But then what? She had no money, and the people of Farrington didn't trust her. Her only option was to settle in another kingdom where no one knew her. Behind the house was Laundus's farm. She noticed he had pigs, goats, and other animals. He had a lot of land, but this wasn't the life for her. She knew this to be certain. "This place smells terribly, and I'm so glad that Mummy decided to send Cindy here," Susan said, entering Laundus's cottage. "Cindy, take our luggage inside. The wedding will be in 2 days at the local church," Ida said, smiling away, as though this was the best day of her life. "Your fiancé has already made you an appointment with the local dressmaker." Cindy sighed heavily and started dragging their heavy belongings inside the house. Her stepsisters were already laughing because she would be stuck with pigs all day long, telling her that this was where she belonged. "Come on, Cindy, I'll show you around," Laundus said, appearing right in front of her. "You'll be working hard around here, and on the weekends I normally sell meat at the market." He didn't offer to help her carry the heavy luggage. Cindy was already planning to leave tonight. A sick feeling and a general sense of dread and pressure was building in her chest. She knew she only had a little time, but she couldn't stay here a minute longer. On top of that, she was expected to have sex with this man, and wanted to vomit at the mere thought of it. He showed her around the farm once she made a cup of tea for herself, Ida, and her stepsisters. Laundus mentioned that the town was several miles away, and that she needed to be careful after dark because the wolves sometimes wandered over, killing the sheep. Laundus's life was extremely basic. The cottage had running water, but when Cindy saw her married bedroom, she was horrified. Their bed was tiny, and most of the space was filled with packages of meat. Cindy had no idea what to think, and went to the other room where she was supposed to sleep tonight. When the sun set behind the horizon, she was lying in bed, thinking of her steamy encounter with the king and her escape plan. She had no idea how or when, but she had to find a way to see him one last time. "I think it's simple, and it will make you look humble, Cinderella. Exactly the way a girl like you should look during a wedding," Ida was saying, while Cindy was standing on a stool wearing the most hideous wedding dress she'd ever seen in her life. The dress was supposed to be white, but it was nearly grey, and it looked as if the dressmaker had pulled it from the rubbish container. It was covered with yellow lace, and she could barely breathe in it. She couldn't escape last night. Apparently Laundus loaned all his horses the day before, and one of the buyers arrived late in the evening to collect the last one. Cindy decided to wait for a better opportunity. She and Ida had been running around town all day long, attempting to sort everything out for the wedding. Her stepmother was extremely determined, and she was haggling over every cent. Cindy just followed her along. She wasn't entirely certain of what to do. She stood, staring at her horrid wedding dress, not allowing this situation to get under her skin. Ida needed to think that she had everything under control as usual.
Yes, stunning. I'll wager your fiancé will fall in love with you all over again,
the obese dressmaker said, but Cindy thought she didn't genuinely believe that. Good. Cindy, take the dress off and let's pack it all up. We also need to run to the baker and make sure they're done with the cake, Ida added sweetly. Cindy stepped down from the stool and went to the back to change into her normal clothes. She quickly shook her head, took the dress off, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her complexion was sullen, and for some reason she looked ill. She told herself that she had to fight for her dreams. She couldn't just give up. Cindy, hurry up, we haven't got all day. I want you to run over to the tavern and tell my daughters to meet us at the bakery. The shrill voice of her stepmother interrupted her thoughts. Cindy nodded and dressed quickly, considering all the pros and cons. She had no money on her, but she could steal a horse and dash back to Farrington. Red was still her friend, and she could loan her some money. It wasn't an ideal plan, but now, at least, she had something to look forward to. She left the dressmaker's shop 5 minutes later and headed toward the north side of town where her stepsisters were drinking in the tavern. They were most likely flirting with some locals as usual. Her breathing was laboured as she rushed through town. Cindy knew that this was her last chance to run away. She looked around, searching for a horse. She had to do this before Ida realized that she was gone. Then she also remembered where her stepmother kept a stash of money, but this was a risky endeavour. She'd been accused of stealing other valuable things in the past. She truly wanted to see Caspian one last time. Perhaps she could find a way to break Ida's spell and tell him everything, the whole truth. Either way, she was willing to try anything to escape from Londres. She could see the local tavern from the distance and stopped by the butcher to catch her breath. There were 2 horses tied to the post outside. Perhaps her plan was crazy, but it was doable. She realized that, but she was desperate enough to try anything at that point.
Have you heard? The king of the Farrington kingdom is looking for a wife,
said a woman who just left the butcher's shop. Cindy froze, thinking that they couldn't have possibly been talking about Caspian. He announced at the ball that he wanted to remarry, but he was only trying to punish her. Cindy didn't expect him to go through with it.
Oh my, have you heard if he found the right woman?
The other girl asked, giggling to herself.
Dunno, but I heard he lined up a few, and he's meeting others too. I'm shocked he's not looking for someone with royal status, but then his own son picked some ugly duckling too,
the older woman added, and they giggled amongst themselves. Cindy's head started spinning, but she should have known that the king wasn't going to wait for her.
King Caspian is such an handsome gentleman, and he deserves to be happy. At the same time, I don't think he should be rushing into an important decision like this.
Yes, his future wife should have class. His dead wife was loved by his people, and she had a heart of gold, the younger one said. The women strolled away from her, heading toward the square, still engaged in their conversation. That was the last straw for Cindy. She needed to get away from there, from Londres and her stepmother. She was ready to scream at the top of her lungs that the king had chosen her, and she wanted him too. She glanced around in desperation, but she didn't know anyone in that stupid town, and didn't want to bring any more attention to herself than was necessary. Before she could even think of what she was doing, she approached one of the horses and began stroking his silky mane. No one was paying much attention to her. She suspected that the horse's owner was running errands in town or was drinking in the tavern. She untied the animal and led it toward the forest as her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to laugh, attempting to imagine her stepmother's expression when she learnt that Cindy had run away. By the time she was galloping through the thick forest, it had started raining. She didn't care. She felt so good as the strong wind blew through her hair. She was finally free. The road ahead of her was long, but she was prepared to ride through the storm if that was necessary. At some point, she must have reached the road, because she heard a few horses galloping behind her. Her stomach was growling, and she might have been a little lost. The coachman moved past her, so she carried on riding beside him. "Is this the road to the Farrington Kingdom?" she asked, and then suddenly another idea struck her. Martha was still in the brothel, and Cindy could ask her for help. She had nothing to lose. Perhaps at some point in the future she could repay her. The man had a long, shaggy beard and kind eyes. He must have seen her soaked through clothes, because he cleared his throat and said, "Yes, head towards the north. We are only a few miles away." Cindy thanked him and encouraged her horse to gallop faster. The night had fallen by the time she reached the town. She was exhausted, soaked through, and hungry. She recognized the building and could see the castle in the distance. Her heart warmed up a bit, and her worries slipped away. Her king was there, and she needed to see him, but not tonight. She had to get to Red first, or find Martha. Either option sounded reasonable enough. It was really late, and Cindy knew Ida wouldn't travel back in the middle of the night. Besides, Ida had no idea what Cindy was planning. That should have bought her some time, and at least she was filled with new hope. If she truly wanted to survive in this world, she had to fight for her happiness. It was now or never. It was up to her to follow through with her crazy plan. No one could tell her what to do. It was her life, and she had to fight for what she wanted, even if it felt nearly impossible.